All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Table Covenant Church. We had a great time at the block party, which was just earlier today across the street at Van Dyke Park. Good time, right? But the trick is, because we had it at in the middle of the day, people with young ones and whatnot, it's kind of a tough transition to come to service at 4:30. So thank you for those of you who went. We also set this thing up here, so there are maybe people at home that are watching. We try not to make a regular habit of this because I think Anna was saying, man, the live stream sounds good. I can just stay home and watch. But glad you're here. We were even thinking of maybe just doing a very truncated service, just like a quick word and then come to the table, because there is something I want to share today that I hope will be kind of like an inspirational and kind of set some vision for where we're headed in the next few months. But we'll do it today. Hopefully people are watching at home, and then we'll return to this in the weeks and months to come regardless. So last week we started a mini-series called Setting the Table, where we've been unpacking our three core values, which you see on this banner here: authentic community, Holy Communion, and Great Commission. Last week we looked at Holy Communion, and today we're going to unpack what does it mean to be an authentic community. This word community is obviously a very popular word. It's almost a buzzword of sorts, especially in churches. Right? Find me a church in America that doesn't say that they value community. I dare you. It's kind of an embedded value in most churches. When I was growing up, the word of choice was fellowship. That's the word that we threw around, but it's the same idea, right? And some churches, the really fancy ones, use the Greek word koinonia. Anyone go to a church where they use that word? No? Okay. It's basically the same word: fellowship, community. But regardless of the word used, whether it's community or koinonia or fellowship, the same sad fate has befallen all of them. Namely, that when we use those words, basically what we're talking about is like hanging out together or being in the same room at the same time. A far cry from what the first Christians modeled in their life together. And so my hope today isn't that we're going to somehow save the concept of community or fellowship, but simply to remind us all that community is, in fact, a non-negotiable part of being church together. And at the end of this message, I want to propose something that will hopefully help us as a community take the next faithful step in truly becoming an authentic community. So, our text today is John 15, and we're going to look at verses 12 to 14. And all of the talks in this series come from John 15. So it goes, "This is my commandment, that you love one another, as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you are my friends, if you do what I command you." So let's just pause, let's pray, and then we'll dive in. Just take a minute and pray for yourself. Ask that God would open your eyes and your ears to receive the word that He has for you. And also take a minute to pray for me that I would be faithful in communicating this word for us all. So let's just pray together for a few moments, and then we'll begin. So God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing unto you today. We pray this in your name. Amen. All right, we're going to walk through this verse, just a few verses at a time, and hopefully this will, again, deepen our appreciation of what is meant by Christian community. So the first highlight here, we're going to look at this phrase, "This is my commandment." It's interesting that the call to love one another is not a suggestion or good advice or even a recommendation, but it's something that Jesus actually commands of His followers. I command you to do this, to love one another as I've loved you. Now, wait a minute. It isn't really friendship or community or a relationship if someone commands you to, right? That feels like strange to us. If anything, being commanded to love someone feels like the very opposite of what a relationship is. But then I thought about families. And so we have an interesting dynamic in our family. As you know, we have 3 kids: Sammy, JJ, and Ellie. And we have the dynamic that exists right now is that Sammy adores Ellie. Like, he loves Ellie. First thing in the morning, he wants to go and you pull her out of the crib and just love on her. He loves Ellie, loves Ellie. And Ellie loves JJ, just loves JJ, always saying his name, JJ, chasing him around. JJ despises Ellie. He cannot stand her. He would rather she never existed in the first place, right? So we have this interesting dynamic. And we've sat down and had these talks with JJ, our middle, and found ourselves saying things like this: JJ, it doesn't matter if you don't like Ellie. She's your sister. You have to love her, right? Friends will come and go, but families forever, right? We find ourselves saying these typical parenting cliches. Friends will come and go, but family's forever. Family will always be there. You have to love her because she's your sister. Now, if we think about it, though, this command to show kindness and love and respect is not based on common interest or natural affinity, but it's simply based on the reality that they're family. You have to love each other because you're family. Now, by virtue of our shared faith in Christ, the person sitting next to you is your brother. The person sitting next to you is your sister. So love each other. The communion table that we talked about last week, this is where the family eats together, right? And we may have profound differences with each other, but around this table, we're reminded that we're a family. Not because we're related by blood, not because of shared ethnicity, not because of political affiliation, but because of faith in Jesus Christ. I think this is the most radical idea in Christianity, is that this table, coming to this table, is the thing that unites us. This is the thing that gives us a shared identity. And unfortunately, we've created all kinds of tribes and segments of society based on anything but faith in Christ. But we are family. We're brothers and sisters because of our shared faith in Jesus. Now, the reason why Jesus commands his followers, this commandment I give you, is because there's nothing easy or natural about loving each other. I like how Scott McKnight, in his book, A Fellowship of Difference, puts it. He calls the command to love one another a rugged commitment. A rugged commitment. And I love this phrase, right? See, the world around us tells us that love is an emotion, it's a vibe, it's a sentiment, it's just something you go with. But for Jesus, it's a command because, frankly, it's easier to cut and run when things get awkward, things get difficult. It's easier to love those who are really similar to you, have all the same ideas as you, or who agree with you on major things. But love as a rugged commitment assumes that things will get hard. It assumes that things will get awkward. It assumes that things will get uncomfortable. But we're committed to walk with each other through that stuff. We've experienced that as a family, for many of you in this room, a rugged commitment. When we were going through hard things as a family, when we were leaving our old church and trying to figure out what to do, we felt commitment from many of the families in this room. Even as we go through this church planting thing with many, many ups and downs, we feel rugged commitment, and we hope that you also feel the same from us. It's a command, not just to love God, but to love one another. The exact opposite of this is something that we've been seeing more and more of, not only in our society, but even in our church. And it's this phenomenon of ghosting. You guys have heard of ghosting? I think it originally kind of came from the world of online dating. But ghosting is this phenomenon where, you're in this relationship, whether it's you're just getting to know someone or whatever, but once the relationship gets to a point where one of the people is kind of like done, or they're ready to move on, or they hit a conflict and they don't want to resolve it, they just poof, vanish. They just vanish. Not a word, not a goodbye, not even the, hey man, it's not you, it's me. Not even that, just complete vanishing, right? Social media, just completely disconnect everything. You text, you call, no response. They're just ghosts. They just vanish. And this is becoming more and more common in our society. This unwillingness to work things out, this unwillingness to even say goodbye or to, let things lie, it's just an absolute, complete vanishing. This is happening around us, but it's even happening within our own church. It's the very opposite of what I think is proposed by this phrase, rugged commitment. So this is the ideal, and this is what we're working toward, but it's not easy. It's very, very hard. In fact, it's the very opposite of what we feel like we want to do most of the time. But secondly, he says, this is my commandment, that you love one another. And this one another phrase in the Greek is this fancy word, aleilon, but it's found around 59 times in the New Testament. Love one another, carry one another's burdens, pray for one another. It's this idea of this kind of shared life. And because it's found so many times in the New Testament, I guess that's our clue that it's a pretty important idea. And basically the idea is this: you can't be a Christian by yourself. It's impossible to be a Christian by yourself. Even though many of our mental images of what it means to be a Christian, whether it's the solo worshiper, arms raised high, or the person kind of diligently taking notes in a sermon, or the one person preaching the sermon, or the one person sharing their faith with another person, most of our conceptions of Christianity are individual. But this would have been completely foreign to first century believers. Because to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus, is not just to believe certain things or to feel certain things. To be a believer is to belong to a family of faith. It's to belong to a Jesus-shaped community. That's what it means to be baptized. You're baptized into a community. You take this Lord's Supper with your community. Now, I've shared this illustration before, but let me try again. But I think we struggle with this because a lot of times we think of community as like something we engage with outside of ourselves. So I'm going to use this podium as my community. A lot of times we think about community as this thing outside of ourselves, and I, the individual, engage with this community. And so I can have lots of communities. I have my family community, I have my work friends, I have my school friends, I have my neighborhood friends, I have my gym friends. I have all these different communities that I, the individual, can relate with, right? And I can participate in these various communities. Now, what's wrong with that, even though like we do it all the time, the trick with that is that it's very easy to slip into kind of a consumer mentality, right? So I'm a part of this community when it suits me, right? When the time is convenient and if it works with my schedule. And then if, they either raise their fees or it gets a little awkward or it gets hard, I can just go to another community, right? I can just find a different community. We can even do this, obviously, with churches. But if community isn't just this thing that we engage with as individuals, what is it then? And I would argue that community, again, is not something we engage with. Community is something that emerges as we love those around us. It's the opposite of consumerism. Because it's not just what suits me, what fits me, it's what emerges out of these loving relationships with one another. And if indeed community then is something that I'm a part of, this is the trick. What happens to me then, the decisions I make, the actions I take, the words I say, don't just affect me, it actually affects our community, right? It has a deep impact on those attached now to me. So if I move, if I get a new job, if I get married, if I experience a death in the family, if I run out of money, these aren't just things that happen to me, the individual, and that I can choose to take to the community or not. If those things happen to me, they're also happening to my community, right? And vice versa. Things that are happening in the community aren't just things outside of myself, but they're also happening to me. Now, this kind of came to a head for me when I was living in Vancouver, and this pastor that I was working with, I remember this so vividly, was sharing this with the pastoral team and the church. And he basically said that he and his wife and his kids were Americans living in Vancouver. And the only reason they were there is because they felt called to this church. They didn't have any family, they didn't have any relatives, they had no safety net in Canada. They were there simply because they felt like God had called them to serve and to love this church community. And he shared one day, he said, guys, I just want to let you know that I don't have like a contingency plan. I don't have a safety net. I don't have like a secret kind of like stash of money somewhere. My plan is if something, heaven forbid, if something happened to me, my hope and my plan is that you, the church, would take care of my wife and kids. Like I remember that so vividly. He said, my plan is that you would actually care for my family if something were to happen to me. Now that's so challenging to the way we normally think about things. Because we normally think about things as, well, take care of yourself, make sure you got your finances in order, your ducks in a row, make sure you got all that stuff. And then once you're secure and stable, then you can participate in this community. But I think doing that actually makes it really difficult to be community. Because the thing that we're disallowing to happen is true interdependence. That I actually need and depend on this community just as this community needs and depends on me. And this is so counter to the way we live in North America. So many of our practices and life decisions don't allow us to live in meaningful community. It's really hard. So it's a commandment, right? This community thing. It's about interdependence, right? It's not just about me going to different communities, but it's about actually being a part of this two-way street. And lastly, it's a sacrifice. Right? So Jesus said, this is my commandment that you love one another as I have loved you. As I've loved you. And as we know, Jesus loved his followers by dying for them, by emptying himself for them, by putting their needs above his own. Jesus gladly went to the cross because that's what one does for one's friends. But make no mistake, it came at a cost. And I wonder if we struggle with authentic community because at the end of the day, it requires something of us. It demands some inconvenience, some sacrifice, willingness to give more than you receive, to show up when you're not sure if others will. But we're not just talking about sacrifice for sacrifice's sake. I'm saying, church and community should be as hard as possible. We're talking about sacrifice, giving up our lives for each other, not just because Jesus told us to, but because it's worth it. See, out of Jesus' death came new life, a new community, a new kingdom movement that not only changed the world, but continues to change the world. And my question for us is, do we believe that if we also approach community sacrificially, the same way as Jesus loved, could that same newness be available to us as all? This new life, new community, new kingdom movement. I wonder if that could be true for our community as well. So it's a command, it's about interdependence, and it will require some sacrifice. Guys, this is ultimately about, like we said, authentic community, right? That's what's up on the banner here. And that means that the people we're talking about are the people that are actually here, like in the room. Not just some ideal grouping of people, not the people that will one day be a part of our community, but the flesh and blood people here in our community. You can always find a better fit or chase after a community that's more in line with your values and your life stage. But my guess is if you keep chasing this ideal community, my guess is that authentic community is always going to remain elusive to you. So I want to end with this quote that I hope kind of sums this up. This is from German theologian and pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer. In his little book, Life Together, he says that the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. But the person who loves those around them will create community. This encapsulates this idea that community isn't some vague, abstract concept or some place out there somewhere else. Community is the thing that emerges when we choose to love those around us. So here's what I want to propose. This is an idea that I want to share for us as we move into the fall semester here at Table. Guys, we've tried all kinds of ways to form community and connection, and we're not a big church, but it's proven to be really difficult to make community happen. The reality is we're an odd collection of people, right? For some of you, this is your community. This is your primary community. For others of you, Table is just one of many communities that you belong to. We're spread out geographically, right? We're in different life stages. Many of us only know each other because we happen to attend this church occasionally on Sundays. So the fact of the matter is we need more places of connection. And because of these realities, geography, life stage, all these other things, it's been a challenge for us to gather outside of these Sunday gatherings. So, if we buy this idea that community flows from loving those around us, we need more opportunities to love those around us, to know those around us, the people that are actually a part of this thing we call Table Covenant Church. So, we've had some success. We've done table groups on Fridays. We found that the community and conversation that emerges after service when we go out to eat has been really rich and meaningful. But the reality is that not everyone can go to table groups on Fridays. Not everyone can go out to eat after service on Sundays. And unfortunately, that means then that those people have been unable to participate in some of our most formational activities. If you're a part of table groups and if you come out to eat on Sundays, you're in the loop. You know people, you know what's going on, you're sharing life, and it's good. But because of finances or because of kids or because of schedules, you're not able to participate, then it's been hard to plug in, right? So, though this is not a permanent solution, here's what we want to try that will hopefully give us some momentum toward building a more authentic community here at Table Covenant. Post-service meals. Okay, this is not rocket science, but here's what we're proposing. We already do pizza once a month, right? The fourth Sundays of the month, we just bring pizza in, usually Domino's, unless Michael wants to do something weird, like Papa John's. But we just have pizza and it's been really good, right? It's easy, people stick around, we literally walk out these doors, there's pizza, like, sit down and have conversation. But we want to reintroduce a second meal once a month. So on second Sundays, we have another meal, right, that's prepared, and same thing, right after service, we go and have a meal together. But the thing that we want to add is that we want to actually organize our community into smaller groups that are going to be organized according to, roughly, geography. And the reason for that is because if we just sort of let people go, then people will sort of settle into, like eating clusters that make sense and are comfortable. And that's great. We love that. And there's 2 other Sundays a month where we can do that. But for these 2 Sundays a month where we have these meals, we want to actually encourage people to sit in these smaller groups because we think that we need a little bit of intentionality. We need a little bit of like inspiration around forming these communities outside of just Sunday gatherings. And so in addition to having these 2 meals, the one other thing we want to introduce is that these small groups would also try to meet once a month in a home. Right? So just, for example, let's say there's a grouping of people that are more west, so Centerville, Fairfax, and Chantilly, those kind of area, whatever like that. There's that grouping there. We would meet on those 2 Sundays after service in the post-service meal, and then once a month we would meet in one of the homes. Right? And each group would have a point person that would like send out emails and whatnot. And we're not focusing on like curriculum or anything kind of super sophisticated. We might give you a question or two to kind of get the conversation going, but basically it's eating together and creating the context for relationships to be formed and deepened. We're going to try this for 3 months. We'll start in October, we'll do November, December, we'll see how it goes, and assuming it goes well, we'll give it another go in the winter, and we'll see how it goes from there. Okay? So I'm just going to stop there and field questions. And we're going to keep talking about this, obviously, because it's only August right now. We're not starting until October. But I just wanted to sort of give you the State of the Union and then propose this idea and let it marinate so that we can kind of hit the ground running in October. Thoughts, questions about community, about this plan. If you have a better plan, let me know, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Yeah?
Let me think before I speak.
What
do you mean when you say community?
What do I mean when I say community? People gather, right? And what I mean by Christian community, authentic community, is people gathered around shared faith in Jesus. That it's Jesus that gives us this community, not our ethnicity, not our political ideology, not our, even just being related to each other, but faith in Jesus. That's what I mean by community. Thank you for that.
Like a body of people.
Yeah.
Would it be like taxpayers or something?
Hopefully taxpayers. But yeah, but for us, community is the people in this room, the people who identify with this church. And what we did with the block party, hopefully also the people who live in this neighborhood as well. Yep.
Going back to like the ghosting thing, I think I've gone through like different phases of like.
You're talking about ghosting, you said?
That genre
yeah.
of like, I guess how I either present myself or like go about relationships. It's like I started like naive, especially like straight out of college. Like, oh, I'm gonna love on everyone. Like I'm gonna be best friends with everyone no matter what. And like give. And then obviously there's the burn phase, and then so it's like I'm at a phase now. I'm on the other side. I'm guarded.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially like we've all had
yeah.
the ghosting. It's like, how do you balance?
Yeah.
How have you balanced it in your sense?
It's honestly, I struggle with that.
It's tiring.
I struggle with it, yeah. And the older we get, it's even harder just because there's less even space in our lives for new relationships and stuff. I think that's the. Okay, so I was talking to another pastor recently, and we're just sharing about stories from the trenches, and the image that occurred to both of us was that we need to have tough skin, right? But we have to have soft hearts, and that's the difference. I think tough skin is like we're not gonna just be like just patsies in the sense of like, oh, we got duped again, but we have to be careful that our hearts do not become hard. And so, and that's where wisdom comes into play, right? So you don't want to be like where you were when you were 21. So I'm going to be friends with everyone. I'm going to give myself, like wisdom would be like, well, I should kind of measure myself and know my own limits, but never get to the point where it's like you're assuming that people are just going to be an energy vampire. They're just going to take. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to some extent, right? But yeah, tough skin, soft hearts would be my kind of pithy answer. Can't lose. I guess you could add that to the end. Hard to like the idea. Clear eyes, tough skin, soft heart, canvas. Doesn't roll. Okay, fun. Other thoughts? Even about this post-service meal thing. By all means, we're workshopping it, but yeah.
Is this different from the Sundays we met in like community groups?
Yeah, I mean we'll still have a service.
So like you're eating with people separately from church.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean? But like, let's say for example today, if today was one of those meals, we'd finish service and then we'd have designated rooms, we'd have the food, and then it'd be like, yeah, Fairfax West would meet upstairs, and like Fairfax East would meet in this room or whatever. Homeroom. And if there's visitors who are here for the first time, we basically just say one of the group captains or point people or whatever. We hey, come join our group for the day. So, yeah. Yeah, David.
You mentioned interdependency.
Yes.
What do you expand on that?
Yeah.
What are you envisioning on that? Like envisioning there, or some examples of
Interdependence. So again, I can preach on this, but I do struggle with it because I feel this immense pressure to A, be self-sufficient, and B, not be a burden on anyone else, right? I struggled with this when I was on staff at the university, and I wrestled with that because I had to raise my own support, right? And I felt like guilty, like I was asking people to support me. But I think there's something really wise in that, where it's like almost the prophetic sort of like, yeah, our culture tells us don't be a burden on anyone else, don't make anyone have to like take care of your needs. But I do think something is lost when we go so far as to not have to ever rely on anyone else. So church could be a place where we actually practice that a little bit. Tangible examples, like we do very basic things, so very bottom floor, easy. We've had babies, a lot of babies in the last few months and years. Bottom like floor, we bring food, right? That's easy. And for people to say, yeah, bring food, that's great. That's really easy entry level. From there, I think it's okay to share about this. Phoebe was brave enough to articulate a need in the realm of like her car kept breaking down. So we sent out some messages, and we raised money, and she was able to buy a new car, right? So that's another level. Can you think of other things? I think that like we really struggle with this in affluent Northern Virginia. It's a really hard thing to, but even away from finances, even just like I need people to talk to where I feel like I don't have to be their pastor, where I can just like be myself, and and that's a need that I have, and I need to articulate that, right? Other people think of ways that we could be interdependent, actually demonstrate and meet each other's needs when our culture is basically one of self-sufficiency.
I guess the question is like going from like you said, the family analogy is like you're always family, but like how do you cross that barrier when we're just friends and then you're not always going to be?
So a few weeks ago, I preached on one of the things we could do in that whole Finding Holy in the Suburbs series. One of the things we can actually do, like we always feel like as wealthy kind of middle class suburban Christians, all right, the main thing we can do is serve and give money, right? Serve and give money, and yes, we should do that because we can. God has blessed us. We should serve. We should give money. But I think another really countercultural and powerful practice we could also do is to demonstrate need. So to ask for help, right? To actually articulate need and to invite people to be help in your life. And that's a really hard one for many of us in the room. I think Ruth and Jeff were sharing a few weeks ago about like childcare. It's really hard to ask for help. Someone offered, hey, go watch Joe for a bit. It's like we just immediately feel like, no, I don't know. Right? But that might be a discipleship thing for some of us, is to actually ask for and let people help us. That's another way I think we can be interdependent.
I'll ask.
Oh, here.
Because I will, I'm going to provide topics of this. We all openly convey.
Yeah. That is definitely one way, though. And it goes both ways. Families need to express that need. People who are able to meet that need should also offer, but we're so small, there's no reason why we can't. Even making that little physical directory a few months ago was our way of saying, like, keep this directory like in your kitchen. We don't have phones anymore, like home phones, but just keep it somewhere where you'll see it, so you can just easily flip to it and reach out to people. Okay? They're back. Our wonderful children. Okay, let's wrap it up there.